believe that the future of farming is inextricably linked with the future of the natural environment, and we'd like to see farmed landscapes across England valued as much for the public goods they supply as the agricultural products they produce.
I think the countryside is rediscovering itself in importance. We've gone through a long period in the last decade or 2 decades where really there's been quite a big disconnection between the urban population and what the countryside produces and the people, what they do in the countryside.
Well, this is what worries me, is the public perception of the countryside, because there's no doubt at all that there is an increasing belief that somehow it's a place of leisure, it should be some sort of glorious countryside park, and ignoring the fact that it is actually a factory floor where Britain's food is produced.
I think there's a real challenge for us to get city dwellers more connected with the rural environment. I think they see agricultural products, but they don't necessarily see the increase in farmland birds or an improvement in water quality, or indeed the flood peak in Ripon dropping by 17% because the uplands are being appropriately managed.
The sort of public good associated with having a thriving, beautiful, natural environment, I think is only going to grow as more and more of us seem to live in cities and need the escape which the countryside can provide.
I think the public are fairly sympathetic to rural living, but they don't always make the connection with the cost of rural life. That's the real political challenge here, to make sure there's a fair settlement which is sustainable and diversifying. That's the only way that we're going to make sure that we don't drive the countryside to bankruptcy in Britain.
So we've called for a long time that we should have a properly structured rural policy unit looking at policy issues to do with rural areas and to encourage smaller and medium businesses to expand in rural areas. It's not rocket science, but it's not being done.
I would argue very strongly that one of the problems with rural areas, particularly the more isolated parts of the country, is that they lack necessary development.
The big danger is that government has to give away on this ridiculous word of sustainability, which it seems to apply to on a rather broad basis to absolutely everything.
I think if you fossilise the countryside, if you wrap it completely in aspic and say no change, then you will then stop those businesses having the ability to preserve that landscape for the future.
The rural economy, I think, is at a critical stage at the moment, and I think there is a real need, probably the greatest need ever, for organisations like the CLA and others to keep a really close eye on how things are actually developing.
We've seen a tremendous change in the financial profile of the rural economy over the last 10 years.
Well, the current state of the economy is much stronger than it's been probably for many years.
Everything is at a tipping point at the moment. I think the countryside is under enormous pressures and farming is under huge pressure.
Our reliance on farming as such in this country is diminishing all the time.
Well, the big immediate debate is going to be continued CAP reform. I'm quite clear that the move from subsidies on production to payments for environmental and public goods are going to continue.
I think that in the next, certainly in the next 10 years, the main use of land use will remain with agriculture.
If we ignore the importance of food security and maintaining a viable food and agriculture industry in this country, we will do so at our peril, and I think it would be highly irresponsible for any government not to be looking seriously now at the importance of food security.
And the whole question of food security, which has rather dipped down the public agenda, I think will remain.
75%, I think, of all food retailing is now through the supermarkets. That the consumers, the people who go out and buy the food, are becoming increasingly interested in localisation.
We're now seeing that young people are now taking more of an interest in food than they have for a long, long time.
And great work has been done by organisations, including the CLA, to encourage education in the countryside and understand how food gets from field to plate.
But very much at the fore of our mind is climate change and how it is we can work with land managers on climate change adaptation.
We're going to see more trees planted, and those trees will be not only producing timber but also going for renewable energy.
Climate change is the biggest single threat facing our generation, and it's a threat not just to us but to our children and grandchildren, and we need to act very quickly if we're to get on top of it.
We've got to be optimistic, be ready for change and prepared to take the opportunities as they come.